Hi, it's Majo John Madden in Hidalgo County, Texas. I don't think there actually is a town. Every time I ask staff at the Walmart, is there anything to see? Their historic downtown or something, they usually say some variation of, gee, there really is nothing here. There really is nothing here. But I was just talking with really nice Latino Walmart staff, and down here in the Rio Grande Valley, 90% of people are Latino. And he was reminiscing about out east. He had lived in Delaware for some period of time 30 years ago. I'm guessing he's 40 or 45. But I also got a call just maybe 40 minutes or an hour ago from the St. Thomas Health Clinic in New Orleans, which is to me kind of the iconic health center for poor people and homeless people. And we were poor, and we had access to our van, I think, the whole time in New Orleans. But that makes us technically homeless in all the states we've been in, I think 8 or 10 states. And by most people's definition, I mean, middle-class people identify with their homes. I heard an ad for a home mortgage outfit that said, it's all about home. And middle class are recently out of poverty, maybe even one generation, and they know they could go back. They're sure not rich yet. And so security, safety, familiarity, and fitting in is awfully important to the middle class, and they identify with their homes. So our home is a 200 square foot tiny home on wheels, and it sure works for us. Sometimes it's too small. In New Orleans, I had already left behind my 88 Ford Econoline high top hippie van. So memories of Pancho, my little Chihuahua. Everything New Orleans back is Pancho, and everything Gulf Coast forward is Magic, the spectacular dog here. And so I had spent from December 23 to March 15, so the anniversary is coming up, in New Orleans. And I said to this lovely woman who called from that clinic to say, you know, you're due for your annual checkup. And I said, awesome, you know, I liked you guys a lot. Do you have like a mobile nurse who would come to Brownsville, Texas? This is, I don't know, 1,000 miles, a long ways away. But I reminisced with her about New Orleans and how much I love New Orleans. And I said, you would, I don't know if you have any African-American blood in you, but 70% of New Orleans people do. I said, but boy, I sure love the black culture in New Orleans. Fun. And having spent the previous summer in Louisville, Kentucky, which I call the most racially polarized city in America after Breonna Taylor's killing. And there's a lot about Louisville in the news right now, and I put up a video this morning about the LMPD, the Louisville Metro Police Department, who are very corrupt. And I've been saying for 2 years the Justice Department is all over them, and they're going to find a lot. And they did, and they're coming forward with it now. But New Orleans was opposite. In Louisville, black people were so hurting, felt so crushed by the Old South. The cops in Louisville really knew that their mission was to protect the affluent from the poor and the blacks. Now, traditionally, that is the role of police in America. They came from renegade slave patrols. But big city police forces live that out a lot more than country cops. And they sure do in Louisville, and they were a very oppressive force. And you have to look at my video about the LMPD, Louisville Metro Police Department, to see details about that. But back to New Orleans, Pancho was still with me and really healthy right up until, I think, the 10th of March. So today's the anniversary of the day that Pancho fell sick, and A day later went into the St. Charles Emergency Animal Hospital on the big, wonderful St. Charles Drag in New Orleans, and never came out, and they were on COVID precautions, and I never got to see her. And it was very heartbreaking. She had been my partner in crime. I'd had her a couple of years before the COVID, but we took off from Asheville, North Carolina when the COVID hit on March 28th. That anniversary is coming up. And she was with me everywhere, traveling so many places where I knew nobody. She was it. She was my primary squeeze. And she turned from a classic city yappy Chihuahua, stranger danger Chihuahua, into one of the most loving dogs in the history of the world. A big milestone in that was she still had some of that in her when we got to the country, but when she would yap at a stranger 100 yards away, and her ears would be straight up, Dad, is this danger? I think maybe this is danger. And I'd say, who is it? Let's go see. And she'd get from my tone of voice that this is a good thing, this is an adventure, and she'd very quickly go to, well, maybe they'll pet me, because most everybody wanted to pet her because she was so sweet. So she almost never barked anymore, and what a grand dog. And I let her off leash an awful lot of the time. Even back in Asheville, she would mostly drag her leash through the city streets where we were living. But in Asheville, the most she would roam. Well, she would sometimes go maybe 50, 60 yards away from me to test her independence. Keep looking back, and then decide that was far enough. She always wanted me in sight. Now, this little perspicator here is a hunting dog. He doesn't need to have me in sight. No. He puts a little pin in his personal GPS as to where he last saw me, and figures he can get back to me. And he'll range several dunes over or a long ways through the woods and know he'll get back to me, and I know that he'll get back to me. He's an entirely different dog, which is great. I was grieving so terribly from Pancho dying that I ran up to Panchita, pretty ironic name. 50 miles north was the last place she had been healthy, and was planning still to be in New Orleans through the Jazz and Heritage Festival a month and a half later. But on the way back to New Orleans, and Pancho's presence was very strong in the van for those couple of days after she died. I just knew she was there. But 2 nights later, I walked on a swamp trail by La Place. It was in between the huge Lake Pontchartrain and another lake whose name will come back to me, and came out in the dark, pitch dark, and something soft rubbed against my leg, and it was this little dog who was 35 pounds then. He's 43 now, and was totally terrified. The local shelter worker said, well, that trailhead is where the locals dump their dogs. I think, was her theory, they do it hoping that the gators will get them and they won't die a slow death of starvation. And apparently the swamps really were infested with gators, and I don't know how many nights this dog faced that terror. After the incredible experience of being abandoned, he kept looking. Certainly they got to come back, even though I'm guessing not everybody in that family was nice. Probably the husband was not nice. But, so he was terrified. He didn't want to get in the van. Took 45 minutes to get him in the van. And then he was in and out all night, and the next day he ran away, and it took an hour for me and the shelter worker to find him. But she thought that based on no tartar on the teeth, he was a year old. And my theory as to why the locals dumped their dogs there was out of hopes that someone like me would come along and take him, which sure worked. And he now has taken Pancho's crown as the world's greatest dog, except possibly yours. But what a dog. If he was full-bred Basenji, Google analyzed a photo I took the next day and said, Basenji, 80% match. Ancient African hunting dog. And he is a spectacular runner and hunter, but he's nice, which Basenjis are not. He loves everybody. So that's the one thing they have in common. They love everybody. And I'll honestly say, probably I had something to do with it, because I do too. All right, bye.